Welcome to Pigeon Racing World with Winners1. In this week's show we'll be travelling to Traralgon, which is on the southeast side of Victoria. But in the first part of the program we'll continue with our segment Starting Up. We have co-host in Brisbane, David Christensen.
G'day Rod, g'day viewers. Thanks for joining us once again, and thank you for all your positive feedback about our first show in our second series.
In Starting Up tonight, David, Stephen Kearsey and myself will discuss pairing up and breeding. When pairing up, there's many theories to what's the best method of putting birds together. Some people believe in eye sign, some people will just put two different colour eyes together, and others will look at the body. If the cockbird's a bit big or the hen's a bit big, they'll put a smaller one to try to balance the race team. In the end, the best way that we've seen, and many lofts, and there's no doubt, is to put performance to performance. Now, this cock here, he's called Santana. He was bred by Owen Petrie. He's one of his top race and breeding birds before we brought him and brought him into Australia. And since here, he has many winners. And now, a bird like this, he was proven, he won, he produced before he came out. Now, when we say, and when a lot say that winners to winners or performance, they're looking at the performance in the background of the bird. So one of his daughters, daughter Santana, she never raced, but she's been a fantastic breeder. So they don't have to race, but what they've got to do is look in the background of the breeding and look for lots of performance, winning performances. Some race birds that race well don't produce. So it's never an exact science, but what we're looking for is performance. One thing when looking for to balance the birds, although Santana is a pretty broad, solid bird, he's not a real big bird, and he's 12 years old now, so he's getting to the twilight of his breeding careers. But he's basically what you class as a medium-sized pigeon. And because over the years we do try to put the bigger birds to a smaller bird, we're finding that generally our race team and our breeders coming through are all medium-sized birds. With the wing, this is pretty typical of what you would find in an imported pigeon from Europe. Not too broad flights, not too thin. But again, if I had a bird at really broad flights, and I've seen others do the same, they would put a bird together which maybe a little bit more thinner flights. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Generally a shorter wing bird, with broader flights, we're more for sprinting, and you'll see a lot of your true long distance pigeons have longer wing, good reach, they have a thinner flight. So again, you're trying to balance up. With inbreeding at the moment, I put him to his daughter because, as I said, he's towards the end of his breeding career, and he will not, if he fills his share or not, we're not sure yet, but we're trying to inbreed to keep that line going. For racing, most of our birds will have at least 2 or 3 crosses from them, and you see in Europe, again, birds like him, they've got many crosses. They're not inbred, they've been bred for stock, but a lot of their stock birds, performance birds in racing have got crosses in them. But again, there's a lot of theories. In the end, performance, best to best, that's what you'll get. Generally once paired, the hen will lay the first egg somewhere between the 7th to the 10th day. 2 days later, the second egg will be laid. 18 days later, the youngsters will hatch. Around 5 days after the second egg has been laid, if the egg is fertile, under a light you'll start to see the membrane forming. This will become more obvious until the youngster hatches. These two babies from one of our Euro sons, National Euro, have only just hatched.
The mating of pigeons for a new flyer is probably one of the more daunting tasks they have to do to breed, the anticipation of breeding good young ones. What I did when I first started, I had pigeons given to me by neighbouring flyers, and when we got those we asked them to tell us how to mate them together, because they've got the experience, they knew what they were, and that helps. Over the years, I've of course have to select my own birds to breed off, and I breed my pigeons by performance, by bloodline, and it's all about trying to concentrate the potential within the bird. When I mate pigeons up, I like them to, when I put them in the box together, that they do look as though they belong together. They match, you haven't got too much of an extreme, they look good together, and that's just a subjective thing that'll come with keeping pigeons for a long time. The breeding methods I use, I tend to just put my pigeons and meld them together. I have different families of pigeons, or pigeons from different sources, and I just meld them together by their performance to create my own mix of bloodlines. When I mate them up, I always watch them to make sure that the hen bird isn't belted up by the cock bird. You've got to be careful with that. Sometimes if you've got any doubts, you can probably get the cock used to the nest box and introduce the hen slowly over a few days and then leave them together. But if the cock is too aggressive to the hen, you've just got to take her away. Before I mate up, I always make sure my birds don't have worms. I think that's the most important thing before I breed. I treat for worms before I mate up, and I haven't treated for canker for 30 years, but if you've got pigeons from different sources, perhaps you should treat your stock birds for canker before you mate them up, just to make sure, to give yourself a little bit of edge. Because at the end of the day, if you don't breed a good young one, you won't have a good racing pigeon. They've got to be well reared, well looked after. While breeding, I hopper feed my pigeons. I hopper feed them. I've got a bit of a idiosyncrasy. I like to have 2 or 3 different types of peas and mix them all up together and put them in a hopper. So they have those peas in front of them all the time. I also, in the last few years, I feed Loki pigeon pellets, which are made by a firm in South Australia. Before they came on the scene, I used to feed Barristock pigeon pellets. And it's just to give the pigeons something a little bit different, to make sure that they're not missing any minerals when they're laying eggs and rearing young ones. I also, in the morning and of a night, I give all of my stock birds just a small amount in a tray of mixed grain, wheat, milo, safflower, a little bit of maize. Not much, just a little bit. And I just do that twice a day. No real reason, I just do it to make sure that particularly when they're driving the hen to the second set of eggs that the cock does feed the young ones properly. When I get up to weaning, when I wean my babies, I like to keep them on peas for a couple of months. Now, a lot of people say you shouldn't do that, but I've always done that. I spoke to Frank Tasker, who's an English flyer, great sprint champion in England, one of the best they've ever had, and he told me that he always weaned his young ones on large grains, on peas and maize. He said, if they never learn to eat it as babies, they won't eat them as old pigeons, and then they'll just eat the lolly seeds, you know, your small seeds, which isn't a good thing.
Dave Christensen will take us through placing the life ring on the pigeon.
The life ring is normally placed on the young bird around 5 to 7 days after hatching. A lot depends on their size. If too young, the ring will just fall off or slide up over the knee. If too big, you won't be able to put the ring on the leg and may need some oil to slide it on.
If you've been following Starting Up, we showed the 2 youngsters being hatched from National Euro to the Australian Euro hen. Now it's time to ring those youngsters. There is a number of ways to hold the pigeon when put the life ring on. It goes on the right leg, and what I find it's less stress. I just turn the bird over, I get the ring, and it goes facing, the number is facing towards the pigeon, and I slide it on that way. And don't forget to record it in your book.
The Australian Racing Pigeon Journal has been an interesting educational read since 1993 and still a significant way to keep abreast of the sport of pigeon racing. In each exciting monthly magazine, editor Jeff Howe brings together Australian and international articles. Join pigeon fanciers throughout the world who subscribe and enjoy the Australian Racing Pigeon Journal. Loft visits, training tips, pigeon strains, as well as health advice from world-renowned avian veterinarians are regular topics featured in this great read. There is nothing better than keeping a quality magazine on the shelf to read anytime.
We head down to the Gippsland region and country town of Traralgon to visit country flyer Daryl Koenig. We'll also call into the information centre to learn more about Gippsland.
Hello there, my name's Meg and we're here at Latrobe Visitor Information Centre. We're located next to the train station in Traralgon in this beautiful old Methodist church that was moved here in 1995. We're the first accredited visitor centre east of Melbourne, and people visit here and get information about our local area. We have lots of visitors from all around Australia and Victoria and sometimes overseas as well, and they come here and they pick up brochures and information about Latrobe City and Central Gippsland as well. Our visitor centre here also stocks a range of local goods from local makers, as well as souvenirs from about Australia, and you can come here and pick up some of those and post them overseas or gift them to people in the area. Our best seller would be probably local honey and local jams, those kind of things. We're open 7 days a week, every day of the year except for Christmas Day, and we're open from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. every day.
Hi, my name's Michelle. I'm just here to talk about some of the most visited attractions we have in Latrobe City. They include the Latrobe Regional Gallery, where we hold contemporary art exhibitions and travelling exhibitions, including Da Vinci machines, which we have starting on February 26th, running for 2 months. We also have nearby the Royal Centenary Rose Garden, which each year holds an annual festival in November. Some of the most visited natural attractions include the Morwell National Park and the Morwell River Falls. We also have a range of walks and rail trails popular for people, visitors to the area. In the towns of Latrobe City we have many retail and dining opportunities, also wineries, and we also have a range of scenic drives people can do, and we have the maps and information for that here at the Visitor Centre. For people travelling through, they can drop into the Visitor Centre and we can supply them with all that information. Also, people who are travelling a bit further afield, Latrobe City is a good base for people to stay. As we say, we're about an hour from the coast and an hour from the snow in the winter. So a lot of people like using Latrobe City as a base for further travels. There are many accommodation options here in Latrobe City. We're also a popular spot for events, both sporting and cultural, and I have many of those happening each year, and hopefully they'll all start again once the COVID situation settles down a little bit. Yeah, we hope to see you at the Visitor Centre this weekend, and come and visit Latrobe City, only an hour and a half from Melbourne.
I'm Darryl Koenig. I race with the Gippsland Pigeon Federation and I live in Traralgon.
Welcome, Darryl, to Pigeon Racing World with Winners1.
Thanks for the invite to be on.
Now, Darryl, I've known you for quite a long time now, and in that time I've always seen you had been very successful with racing pigeons. Can you tell us a little bit about when you got into pigeons and how long you've been doing it?
I got into pigeons when I was about 12. So that was 50 years ago, and believe it or not, the reason I started in pigeons is my grandmother said I needed a pet, and my dad didn't want me to have a dog digging up his garden, so my uncle had pigeons as pets, so I ended up with a pair of pigeons, and then I've raced continually every year since then.
Have you always lived in Traralgon?
I've always had pigeons in Traralgon. So we originally came from Curramborough and then moved down to Traralgon when I was in grade 2, and then joined as a junior in the Traralgon Pigeon Club. And at the time there was 5 to 7 juniors who had the old tin lizard clocks, and a couple of the club members used to look after the juniors, and we clock our pigeons in, put the ring in the top of the tin lizzie, turn the handle, and then jump on our bikes and ride down to his place, and then he'd work out how long it is since the clock had started. So then from there he'd work out when we clocked. So it was an old, but it kept old way of doing it, but it was good for the kids with the interaction, and with other kids, and then from there I progressed into the seniors, and then we probably had the maximum 15 members, maybe 17 members in Traralgon over the years, and it's been up and down. And
So how many flyers are currently in your area and your federation combined?
our federation is getting smaller each year. This year, at the moment, we're down to 12 or 13 members in the federation. Traralgon Club, which is a separate identity now, they've got 6 or 7 members. So at the heyday in the Gippsland Pigeon Federation, we had up to 45 members in Moe Mall and Traralgon, and then Hayfield joined in as well. But then Moe was the biggest club, and it's now down to 3 members. So things have changed a little bit. The good times of when we're basketing and it'd take us 3 or 4 hours to basket our pigeons, they're all gone now. There's only a few of us there, and we get it done quick, and with the electronic timing, it's over quick. The good times also were when our kids were involved. There was a couple of families, our friends as well, they'd bring their kids, and the kids would help basket the pigeons or tick off hen or cock, or had a job, and it was a real family affair. We'd have a barbecue after basketing or clock off night, and it was a really good social outlet for a Friday night and a Saturday night, or a Thursday night and a Saturday night. That was when we were really going well.
Now at the moment it has been a bit of a split. You have got 2 different federations basically, Seoul and different areas. What's happened with that? Do you see that coming back together? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I don't know. The split was a group of flyers wanted to fly with Melbourne all the time. For the 4 years with Greater Melbourne, where they fly 4 separate tracks, where since 1987 we've been flying 2 years with Greater Melbourne when they're flying west or westerly or northwesterly, and then 2 years they go northeast and their easterly track, we go east. And the reason we did that was because of the mountains. If the weather's not any good, the returns weren't any good when we got in with Melbourne behind the mountains. So the federation as a whole wanted to stay the 2 years this way and 2 years that way. So when Greater Melbourne or any other federations that we wanted to join were behind the hills, we could go two years up the coast and follow up the coast up to Shell Harbour, and then Anna Bay or Nelson's Bay. And it's different, a little bit different racing. It's headwind racing going that way, and depending on the season, you had good returns. But the push is expense. It's cheaper to do some races on your own and then join in with Melbourne, and then you have to pay per bird for what you got left. But when we go east, it's you pay for the whole season, and so there's no big organisation you can piggyback onto. We just have to do it, and it costs more. So that was part of the reason that the fleet split, the federation split, because of the cost as well.
Do you see in the long term it all coming back together?
I don't know. Hayfield Club split off the federation for a similar reason 5-6 years ago. They came back this year with the federation, but that only lasted 1 year. So that wasn't a really good result. And the cost outweighs the people who the betterment for the pigeons, for getting the better races. The federation's adopted a process where, for the Liberation Committee, and I'm the Liberation Officer, that we don't always race Saturday. We pick the best day, either Saturday, Sunday. If Sunday's going to be a better day and a better opportunity to get better returns, we go on the Sunday. And if Saturday, Sunday's a bit iffy and Friday or Monday's going to be perfect, well then we'd go on the Monday. And because we've only got 10, 15 members, it's not a big hassle. You can contact everyone easily, let them know this is going to be a better day, so we're going to go that way. And it seems to work well. Everyone's happy getting their birds home, and when the birds come in, they're coming in together in a more dense group of pigeons rather than getting split up with the bad weather or things that can go wrong. So that's working well for us.
We'll be back after this short break with more of Daryl Koenig.
Yeah, g'day guys, Richard Clement from the NCF Federation in Newcastle, flying partnership with my father Malcolm up here, and just wanted to comment today on a product that we've been using over the last couple of seasons called Protein Plus, which we sourced from Winners1 in Victoria. Protein Plus is a product that we started using in our stock loft as a trial product a couple of years ago. We were interested in how we could ensure that when our youngsters had those last few days in the nest before they went into the race loft, and as they went into the race loft didn't lose any body in condition, and we found that the product was particularly helpful with that, and we were very happy with our first trials. We used it then a little bit more in the stock loft and found that over time our pigeons, particularly as they went into the third and fourth round of breeding, weren't losing body and were still in really good condition at the end of the breeding season, so that was really a positive for us in the first year. Last year we used it in the race loft for the first time. We found it to be a really good product to help put condition back onto the birds and to help the birds build back up a little bit quicker than what they probably previously would have without having to change their feed base too much, particularly early in the week. We've had a pretty successful couple of years up here, winning multiple club and combine and federation averages, and last year particularly was a record-breaking year for us, and we put some of that success down to the fact that we've been able to use this product consistently now, and we'd have no hesitation in recommending it for other flyers who want to try and aid that recovery period, particularly after a hard race or a hard toss.
The brown coal-fired thermal Loy Yang power station on the outskirts of Traralgon can easily be seen. With the Yallourn power station in the Latrobe Valley, they are the second largest employer behind hospital and aged care.
Next door, and the school kids came in here for a day or a couple of hours with a teacher, and I went through what we do with the pigeons and how pigeons, and I let them touch it, give them some feathers and things like that, and showed them eggs, and so I spent a bit of time with kids to try and widen their views about pigeon racing. And also when I go on holidays, I quite often talk about pigeons to people who, and it's surprising, because I've lived with them all my life, a lot of general public just don't understand what pigeons are out or how it works. They believe that we take them somewhere and then they race, like race horses or greyhounds, and then you explain to them about how we take them away and then go together and they come back to each person's loft. They get to appreciate it a bit better.
Now, I understand that you raced one year in Melbourne. You rented a house, built a loft.
Yep.
Can you tell us your thoughts on the differences, or if there is a difference between country racing and city racing in the metropolitan areas?
Yes, that was something that I always sort of wanted to do. I wanted to race in Melbourne. Now, and it took a while for my wife to give us permission to do that. And I was always of the belief that in Melbourne there was a lot more members, a lot more pigeons, and the racing was a lot easier in returns. That there'd be big flocks of pigeons coming into Melbourne. And what I found out, it's actually easier racing in the country in some respects, because when we get our pigeons out coming home from races, in the first hour, we get probably 90% of the pigeons home that we're going to get, and a lot of times you get them in big groups of 10, 15 or 20, depending on the distance. What I found in Melbourne, that we class it as, my wife and myself class it as long distance racing, where you get one pigeon and then a bit later you get one pigeon and then a bit later you get one pigeon. And sometimes in Melbourne you had to be down the club rooms with an hour and a half of clocking, and in that time I might have sent 30, I'd only have 3 or 4 home, and then have to go to the club where in Traralgon at the same distance you'd have most of your pigeons home in that time. You'd still end up with the same amount of pigeons home, but it took all day. Now whether that's because Melbourne's spread over a big area and the pigeons get broken up and they're not all heading into the one funnel, they're just heading home and they get broken up. I don't know why, but it was surprising. There was one bloke that I was talking to one day when we were basking for a toss with Rod Churchill, and I was talking to him, telling him I'd come from Traralgon, I'd come down to experience racing in Melbourne, and I said, well, I wanted to see all the big flocks come into Melbourne. And he goes, well, you're 10 years late for that. I said, that hasn't happened for 10 years. That was used to happen, but it doesn't happen anymore. It's all different now. And I found it all different. But on the good respect of racing in Melbourne, I met a lot of nice people in the club and it created some new friends.
You had a lot of success, not just locally, in money races and overseas, and we'll cover that a little bit more with your wife Nadia. But with that, can you tell us what lines of birds that you used to have, what do you currently have, or what you're looking at bringing in the future?
Yeah. I based my pigeons originally from Archie Robertson from South Coast. And we used to go and visit him every year or a couple of years, and I'd get a couple of pigeons off him. And when I introduced that into the original pigeons that probably weren't very, very good, the standard lifted. So that was my basis to start with. And then, of course, in 1990, when the import ban was lifted, there was I got some Naturgales, and then when I got them and crossed them in with Archie's pigeons, it was the first time that I multiply clocked pigeons, like the same pigeons from different races. Normally you clock one and do all right and you think, well, that's good, but then it mightn't do any good in the future. When I started racing some imported pigeons, you get multiple pigeon that you might clock 2 or 3 times. And when we first started, we went to China to a one-off race, and then we went to South Africa and entered pigeons in the South African race. And when we were over there, there was birds that were doing constantly well, were bred down from Hardy Kruger's pigeons. So a couple of years later, we were on a tour with bloke from Queensland, from Rockhampton, North Milner, and I asked him, did he know of any pigeons, Hardy Kruger pigeons in Australia? And there was a bloke in his club that sold them. So I asked him if he would look at them and pick out me 5, and I arranged to get 5, and Norman ran and picked them out. So the Hardy Kruger, and the reason I got them was for the one-off races, because they had a good reputation for the long run races. And around about the same time, I got some Durrell Sablons from Ian Young, which come from yourself originally, and they crossed in together. And when I crossed them in together, I had better results in the one-off races. The Hardy Krugers at my loft haven't set the world on fire, but the Durrell Sablons have done well with crossing them into my original pigeons, and then I crossed them in with the Hardy Krugers and send them the one-off races. So my aim at the moment is to do well at one-off races. It's sort of, because our membership's down in the club, it gives you an outside interest, and same as when we could still send pigeons to South Africa. You can watch the pigeons come in on the on your video screen or on your computer screen. They have videos set up, and it gives you another something to do when our race is finished, this season sort of finished, and it's good to see how they train them and get them in and all that sort of thing.
want to tell you a little story about my best pigeon, Gladiator, the Olympic pigeon and national ace bird for my loft. Yeah, that weekend he won the second prize, so he became Olympic pigeon and national ace bird.
In the year 2000 I bought a pigeon voicer in the club here from Jos Sampermans, and this was the papa of Tiesto that I bought there. Also we raised this pigeon that we bought as voicer, and he won 2 times the first prize on Boers. Then we bring him to the breeding loft and he bred us famous pigeon Tiesto.
In 2017 I made my restart in the pigeon sport, and I decided to build my strain around one specific pigeon, Finn, and also of course his parents. So my second base pigeon in the loft is Ricky. Ricky is related as well to Finn because the mother and himself are cousins. Ricky was my first national ace pigeon since I raced with the pigeons in 2014, and he was also very successful the years afterwards, so he was 3 years in a row in the top 6 in the PIPA ranking on the long distance races.
I started with my own birds in a small loft in 1995. It was a loft by 2 by 2 only. I lived with my mother. It was for me also easy to get into the sport in a short period. Good pigeons also, because we were related to several guys who flew on a high level. The most famous name was of course the Huben family. 2004, Queen L, our basic hen, she won first national on La Souterraine. Was about 600 kilometers. She was fastest against 19,000 pigeons, old birds and young birds together.
Ik ben Nicolas Gijzelbrecht en ben gestart met PIPA in 2000 als nieuwswebsite. En in 2008 ben ik dan begonnen in het klein met PIPA Elite Center. Dat was met een koppeltje duiven en dat één koppeltje zijn dan meerdere koppels geworden. En in de loop van de jaren zijn we zo wel geëvolueerd. Beslist hebben met ons 3 dat een duif maar verkocht mag worden als wij vinden dat die goed genoeg is voor onszelf, voor de eigen kweek.
So Nadia gets the birds in for me. She's home waiting to get them in, and it's a big help, and I'd be lost without her. Right, this is my race loft. I've got 6 sections. I've got the centre section is the trapping section, and then I've got two sides, 2 on section on this side for the cocks, 3 on this side for the hens, and then the stock cocks up the left hand side and the stock hens down the right hand side. Up here I've got a couple of curtains here, and I use that when it gets colder. Now that it's summer and the birds are molting, I leave it wide open so the feathers can blow out, because I'm on 8 acres here, and it doesn't matter, I haven't got any close neighbours. So when the weather starts to get a bit cooler, I lower the first curtain down and have that shut. And I have it shut all the time, especially once we get close to start racing. And then once we start racing and it gets foggy and frosty nights, I put the second curtain down. Originally I put it there, I was experimenting with the darkening system, but I sort of didn't get it to work. But now I use it to keep the birds warmer at night on the cold frosty nights and keep the fog out, keep the moisture out. Then each morning when I let the birds out, I put this one up, the heavier one, and then I'll leave these ones down during the racing season. The same on the other side. I have a similar setup that goes down. The grey ones go down all the time once we get closer to racing,
and then this one goes down at night and then goes up again in the morning. It's a heavier one just to keep that moisture, the cold air out. This cage, I haven't got a curtain because the door's in the way, and I couldn't think of a way that was simple to block that in. But birds race as well to the perch in this cage, but the system seems to work. It keeps it easy to clean, stops the feathers blowing out during and I just whoosh around and clean.
Now you have a fly in here.
My fly in under here, I've got 3 pads. They're cut in, 3 pads. They're 150 mil apart. This is about Mark 6 or 7. I had different systems. I had them coming in where these doors are here and had those doors down there. But then I found this system is the best system that I've used so far, where the birds go in there, they go in through the bobs, they get timed in, the hens will go to the right and the cocks will go to the left. When I let them out separately, I have one side shut, so they get in the habit of just going to that one side. When I let that side cocks out, they go in that side. I shut that up, let the hens out, and then they go in that side. Same from the toss. That's part of the reason why I toss hens and cocks separate. So that when my wife's getting the birds in, they all go in the one side, and I don't have to sort them out later. They just go in. And there might be 1 or 2 late ones that I catch, and I've got marker rings on the cocks and no marker rings on the hens.
What age do you separate your hens and cocks?
I separate them. I've got the first round in with the cocks at the moment, with the 2-year-old cocks, and I've got the second round in with the 2-year-old hens. Now, very shortly, in the next couple of weeks, I'll be starting to pick out a few hens and put them in the hen side, and I'll be starting to pick out a couple of the second round cocks that are a bit more boisterous and put them in with the cocks. The reason I keep them separate until this sort of stage is because they learn to fly different. This lot's been up and flying for a month longer than this lot. So now that they're all up and flying, and I'm trying to get them to fly an hour, so now the hens are starting to fly an hour, I can start swapping around and stop them breeding and mating. So this is the cage for the cocks. The cockbirds come in this side, or the race birds, and then during the off-breeding season, which we just finished, I have the cockbirds in here. I don't use every breeding box. I leave a couple empty during the breeding season, and just to stop them fighting. If I use every box, it gets a bit confusing. I haven't got that many stockies for every box in here. The cages, the stock cage, I clean Wednesdays and Sundays, and the race cage I clean every day. The reason I clean the stock cages on Wednesdays and Sundays is that the more often you clean it, the littler the job it is. If you leave it for a week or 2 weeks, it seems to be a bigger job. It's harder to get. It's easy to scrape it if you just do it twice a week. The stock birds are automatic water, which I have that, and I clean that on Wednesdays and Sundays too. It just makes it a little bit easier when I go on holidays and the birds are used to drinking out of the automatic waters. The trouble is, if you don't clean it often enough, you get a bit lazy. I've been scaling down. The last couple of years I've had 120 rings. This year, because of I've got a lot of 2-year-olds because we didn't race last year. I've only bred. I've used 100 rings, but of that, 20 went to one lot races. So that leaves me with about 80 babies and about 80 2-year-olds. Perches have changed a lot since I first built the loft. I've added the perches so I can scrape forward, and then the droppings fall down the back. A lot of lofts have the perches going all the way to the back, and then you've got to pull the droppings forward. So this way I can push it, and it all drops down the back. And it also keeps the birds from fighting a little bit and keeping each other clean. So the bird above them is not dropping on them. There's a hen in here bred out of one. Oh, actually, I bought from you. that got 3 prizes in Adelaide last year.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I made it to the Hardy Kruger cock, the original one, and it's a hen that had Sablon and Koopman, I think.
Yeah, that Koopman Sablon cross has been fantastic. Obviously, Gerald Koopman put the Sablons into his birds and still doing that. So it's great to see one that you got off us with that Koopman Sablon cross work back in. What's your thoughts on that too? Do you, when you're buying a breeding bird, does it matter if it's a cross or does it have to be pure? What's your general opinion?
I've sort of gone for birds that have done well. When I started with the Hardy Krugers, I didn't know a real lot about them, so I had to go on what Norm Milner thought of them, and he picked them out. Plus the owner picked out what he thought would suit me. So I sort of didn't have an opinion. I just sort of hoped for the best, and as it turned out, I got a really good stock cock. The Sablons I got off Ian Young, and then so what I've done from then is import in others that were related to the first 2 that I got off Ian Young, which have bred really well.
Well, those birds were direct off our imports, and the other one, the cross one, I think that was Next Generation Down. Is that right? The Koopman?
That's correct.
Yep.
Next Generation Down.
Yeah.
I've got a young baby in there I just weaned the other day, and that's bred from a hen I bought from your last sale, and which is out of New Vapor. Both sides, and I've made it to 08. He was a son of New Vapor, so I've sort of inbred that, but unfortunately I only got a single nester.
Now that would be just for stock though.
Just for stock, and I'll never let it out. It's in there, and hopefully it'll keep the bloodline going on each year. And I've done it with the Hardy Krugers as well. Each year I pick out a Hardy Kruger that's bred well, a straight one, and mated it to another Hardy Kruger that I bought, and then kept a couple of young ones to try and keep young blood from the originals.
Well, New Vapor, she was actually bred by Freddie and Jacques van der Heide, and is actually a sister to 2 of their national winners, so she's really well bred. And it's funny how that good blood, straight away Youngie got 2 off her. They produced everything, and then you got them. They've done fantastic as well, and we've done a lot. So it's great when you see performance in a background and you prove that it doesn't have to be off, it doesn't have to race to be produced.
Yeah.
But once it's got to have good performance, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And I've found too that once you get a good performing pigeon, if you can get their young ones to breed well, then it sets you up for years to come. If you sometimes you get a good stock pigeon and you think, well, that's fantastic, but then its offspring breed very little, and it's nowhere for the future. If you can get good stock birds that reproduce, it's your future's set for a few years.
Yeah.
Come on. Come on. It's a real family affair here on race day when we've got most of the birds home, and we go inside, have a cuppa, and next thing our cockatoo starts going, come on, and we know that there's a bird coming, so we know to come out and get it in. She's been with us for 40 years and has learned every trick that we know. Come on, Sam. You want to scratch? Come on. I've even, on race day, I've even been talking to her saying that she's calling them and I can't see any birds. I'm saying to her, where's the birds? I can't see none. And then a bird will, from up high, it'll appear. Yeah, this is, the cockbird is 08, which is the original one I got from Youngie. He's out of Franz Moby and New Vapor, and he's the foundation of the loft. The hen there is his granddaughter, and I've mated them, and her mother is an imported Sablon from a different line, and I've made them up to try and get a pair for stock.
Welcome back to Pigeon Racing World with Winners1. We have more of Traralgon and pigeon flyer Daryl Koenig. Now, you and Daryl have travelled to a number of one-off races. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
I really enjoy going overseas, especially South Africa. That was pretty special with our good friends Stephen and Rhonda Kearsey. Just all the animals that we see.
We go in the one-off races over in South Africa, for example, but the main reason we go in them is just to go on safari afterwards. So that was the lead-in was to go to the race and watch the pigeons come in and hopefully get a prize. But then the big part of the holiday, it was good meeting all the famous pigeon people from all over the world. That was good meeting some of them. But then when we go out in safari, out in the bush, it's just fantastic. And Nard and I are both animal people, so we look into doing that as often as we can, but not at the moment.
No.
You also raced the Adelaide 10,000s. Do you ever travel over for that race?
We have travelled over there the once, and
we went to a wedding.
Yes, that's right. So we ventured over to the loft as well, and that was good to see the loft and the conditions the birds are in, and we saw the birds come home.
Yes, from the last race.
Yeah, and Daryl was fortunate enough to have one come home that morning that we were there. So
was that the time you won or second?
No, that was the time I got Pigeon of the Year. That pigeon had to get home. I think it was the second. They came on. There was no birds on the day, and they were second day birds. But I can't remember what prize it got off the top of my head. But it got Pigeon of the Year because it got home early enough to get enough aggregate points, which was good for us because that was our first time that we'd done anything what you call decent in a one-loft race, and with pigeons before I started looking for one-loft pigeons.
You've done well in that 10,000. What's been your results?
I've been in it for 4 or 5 years. My best result was getting first and second with the same pigeon. And when it got first, one of my own other pigeons got second. So one hen got first and second, and then another hen got second to the other one that came first, which was a real highlight for what we wanted to achieve, and then we got a result. And that's what sort of got me really involved in trying to do as well as we can in one-off races. Of course, we'd like to win the $50,000 races, but we haven't yet. The one I got first and second with was the sire was a Hardy Kruger Doral Sublime, and the dam was a bird I got from John Van Beers. So, which he's got a bit of Bushart Jansen in it. The one that got second was a Hardy Kruger to a Doral Sublime cross.
Now, you also raced in a one-off race in China. I understand that was a bit of an experience.
We only travelled there. Yeah. That was our first time overseas to China. And that was pretty good. That was a special day too. Like, they had barbecues and lots of activity going on before the birds came home. We didn't have any birds in that race. We just went on a tour. Who was?
It was
Ray Fewings, was it?
No, it was Pearson.
Jan.
Yeah. The reason we went, we saw it advertised in the magazine that they were going to doing a pigeon tour, and we thought, well, the kids are left home now, and other people had done other pigeon tours from Dragon Club with Ray Fewings. So we thought, oh, well, here's an opportunity to go over and our first time overseas, and we loved it. It certainly opened our eyes to how other people live, which we hadn't experienced before, and we met a lot of good friends then too, and still stay in contact with them.
What highlighted places did you go and see?
The Great Wall of China, the Terracotta Warriors. That was pretty amazing. Like, just how large the area is that they've excavated, and What else did we go? Sian.
Tiananmen Square.
Oh yeah, Tiananmen Square.
Did you see the Forbidden City?
Yes.
Yes.
We did see the Forbidden City.
You take all day there. Can't you?
Yeah. Oh, it's that large, isn't it? Big area too. Saw the pandas at the Beijing Zoo. That was good too.
Thanks, Nadia and Daryl, for inviting us to your lovely home and being on Pigeon Racing World with Winners1.
Thanks for inviting us to be on there.
Yeah.
The train service takes you from the Gippsland area to Melbourne City. An artificial lake built to supply water cooling to Yallourn Power Station, Lake Narracan, was constructed between 1959 to 1961. A picture setting for bushwalkers, recreational sports like fishing, jet skiing and water skiing are all permitted. The surface area of the lake is 280 hectares, 690 acres, and has a catchment area of around 1,900 square kilometres. The Maui Golf Club, caravan and camping grounds are located on the southern shore. The Latrobe Valley Model Aero Club is located on the lake, as well as the Hovercraft Club of Victoria. With that small glimpse of the Gippsland area and Traralgon, it may be a great location to head to on the weekend. Before we go tonight, I'd just like to mention that David and I have had great support from the general public and the Pigeon fraternity to the program. From us, thank you. I hope you enjoyed tonight's show, and good night, David.
Good night, Rod. Good night, viewers. Hope you enjoyed tonight's show.
You'll be watching Pigeon Racing World with Winners1. Good night.